JJ Redick. Oh, who doesn't love to hear some JJ Redick takes? I know I do. Wow, talk about putting your former head coach on blast yesterday. This is Sports Guy Talking that you guys are watching and listening to. I am Dustin Tran, your host, as I am here today to talk about JJ Redick blasting Doc Rivers for making excuses once again on First Take. For years, Doc Rivers has been a choke artist in the NBA playoffs. Despite having talented rosters on multiple occasions, it now seems like the Bucks are going to underachieve in the NBA playoffs with Doc Rivers being their head coach, as they are just 3-7 in games coached by Doc Rivers. Before I say anything else though, I want to present you guys with the topic question. So here it is. Do you agree with JJ Redick for his comments on Doc Rivers? Absolutely. It's about damn time somebody questioned that Doc Rivers guy. I think Doc Rivers is massively overrated as a head coach. Now, don't get me wrong. Do I think Doc Rivers is a coach that can get you to the playoffs all the time? Absolutely. Do I think Doc Rivers can get bad rosters to overachieve? Absolutely. But when you look at Doc Rivers, when he's been on great teams, he doesn't get the most out of great basketball teams. And obviously, the Milwaukee Bucks have a pretty loaded roster. They've got Giannis Antetokounmpo. They've got Damian Lillard. They've got Chris Middleton. They've got a pretty good roster all around. They've got star players. They've got role players. And yet the Milwaukee Bucks have struggled tremendously under Doc Rivers. I remember their previous head coach, Adrian Griffin, got roasted a lot, even though he was 30-13 as a head coach, because he was just not winning the games in pretty fashion. Well, I can tell you one thing with Doc Rivers now, they're losing in bad fashion. They are 3-7 in games coached by Doc Rivers. And obviously, Doc Rivers is now making excuses once again. I'm going to show you guys this clip of what I'm talking about with Doc Rivers. Roll the film.
Taking a job when you're about to go on the toughest road trip of the season is not the smartest decision. I even told them that. Can we wait till All-Star break? You know, it would have been a lot nicer. But you know, it's like the end game is what we're playing for. And the organization felt strongly that a change needed to be made defensively and things like that, and that's what we're doing. The problem is, while you're doing that, you're in the middle of the season on the toughest trip that you're on, and in 3 or 4 of those games, 2 of your key players are out. So it is what it is. But so that in that way it's been harder. I mean, the fact I've been in Milwaukee 4 days. You know, I've had the job for 3 weeks, so it's been difficult. It's been probably more difficult than I thought.
Are you kidding me? Another excuse by Doc Rivers. This man just keeps coming up with excuse year after year, team after team. How does this dude get 5 head coaching opportunities to be a head coach in the National Basketball Association? You look at how he was a head coach for the Orlando Magic. You look at how he was also a former head coach for the Boston Celtics. He also had the privilege to coach the Los Angeles Clippers and the Philadelphia 76ers. Now he's on the Milwaukee Bucks. What dude gets 5 opportunities to be a head coach in the National Basketball Association? Unless you're some all-time great head coach, you're not going to get that many opportunities to coach a franchise. And somehow, some way, Doc Rivers continues to get jobs after job. And obviously, I had a problem with the Milwaukee Bucks hiring Doc Rivers at the time. This is not me overreacting to the slow start Doc Rivers had with the Milwaukee Bucks, because I said it at the time. I said when the Milwaukee Bucks hired Doc Rivers, you are making a grave mistake. You should have kept Adrian Griffin as the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. And all these people were telling me, oh, Adrian Griffin, he wasn't a good coach. It was time to go. Man, shut up. You ain't know nothing about basketball if you came up with that take. I thought Adrian Griffin did a pretty solid job with the Milwaukee Bucks. They were 30-13. They were second in the East. They did a pretty good job doing what they were supposed to do offensively. I know defensively they had some things to work on, but shoot, that's what the regular season is for title contending teams. They're supposed to work on things that are not necessarily the greatest strength. And obviously Damian Lillard is a defensive liability. Don't get me wrong, he's an all-time great offensive player, but he's a defensive liability for a reason. You will have to coach around the limitations that Damian Lillard has defensively. And Doc Rivers once again is coming up with excuses time and time again. Obviously, it's telling me that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be early exits in the NBA playoffs this year. They're going to underachieve yet again. And former player JJ Redick took issue with this on First Take. JJ Redick, as you guys know, used to play for Doc Rivers back when Doc Rivers was the head coach for the Los Angeles Clippers. He reacted on First Take. He got pretty animated about the whole thing. He put his former head coach on blast. Roll the film.
I've seen the trend for years.
What's the trend?
The trend is always making excuses. Doc, we get it. Taking over a team in the middle of the season is hard. It's hard. We get it. Just like getting traded in the middle of the season is hard for a player. We get it. But it's always an excuse. It's always throwing your team under the bus. They lose to Memphis. Oh, it's his players' fault. Memphis was playing G League guys and two-way guys. And then you look at his quotes over the weekend. Now he wants to take credit for the James Harden trade to the Clippers working out. He wants credit for that. There's never accountability with that guy.
There you go, JJ Redick. I got to give you some kudos for that, man, because you were absolutely right for what you said on First Take. Doc Rivers never takes any accountability whatsoever. You look at all these Doc Rivers fanboys, and they always say, oh, it's the player's fault, or it's the organization's fault, or he just had bad luck. Look, at some point, the common denominator is you. You're the common denominator in all of this. At some point, it comes back to you. And you know what? There's a reason why you've blown 3-1 leads time and time again. There's only been 13 blown leads in the history of the NBA when it comes to blown 3-1 leads. Well, Doc Rivers owns 3 of those. You look at how Doc Rivers blew a 3-1 lead on the Orlando Magic in 2003 against the Detroit Pistons in the first round. Now, that one, I'll give Doc Rivers a pass because Doc Rivers was an underdog in that series, and the Orlando Magic didn't have that great of a roster compared to the Pistons. So that one, I'll give him a pass, but I'm not giving him a pass for the other teams because you look at the 2015 Clippers team. That Clippers team was really loaded. JJ Redick was a starter in that lineup, and you look at how they had Chris Paul, JJ Redick, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, and obviously the Rockets had James Harden and Dwight Howard. That was a series the Clippers should have won. They were up 3-1. They blew a huge lead in the fourth quarter because Josh Smith goes off for the Houston Rockets. Yeah, I said that correctly. Josh Smith, out of all people, and they didn't have a game plan to slow down the Rockets, and they got destroyed in Game 7 against the Houston Rockets. So obviously that was pretty bad on Doc Rivers' part. He got outcoached badly in that series. And then you look at the third blown 3-1 lead he had. That was in the bubble. It was the Clippers versus Nuggets in the 2020 NBA playoffs. That was pretty embarrassing all around because that Clippers team was loaded. They had Kawhi Leonard, they had Paul George, they had Lou Williams, they had Patrick Beverley, they had a lot of really good players. And you look at the Denver Nuggets that year, they really weren't that loaded. Yes, they had Jamal Murray, who was going off in the bubble, and they had Nikola Jokic, but outside of those two guys, it's not exactly like the Denver Nuggets had a great roster compared to the Los Angeles Clippers. You can add it up the way that you want to, but you know what? There's a reason why Doc Rivers keeps blowing 3-1 leads, and it's because he doesn't take accountability for his mistakes ever. And also, his offensive sets that he draws up are quite frankly limited. He really is more of a locker room guy where he's supposedly a player's coach, even though he's a guy that throws players under the bus, but whatever. You look at what Doc Rivers has done in terms of blowing 3-1 leads. You also look at how Doc Rivers has also blown 4 3-2 leads. You look at how he blew 3 of those when he was on the Boston Celtics. He blew that against the Orlando Magic in the 2009 NBA playoffs. That was in the second round. You also look at how he was up 3-2 on the Boston Celtics in 2010 against the Los Angeles Lakers in the NBA Finals before Kobe came back and carried the Lakers to victory in Game 7 against the Boston Celtics. And then you look in 2012 where LeBron James was going on his first title run with the Miami Heat. Doc Rivers was up 3-2 in that series. He ends up finding a way to blow that in the Eastern Conference Finals. And then of course you look at this past year in 2023 when he was on the Philadelphia 76ers as their head coach. They were up 3-2 against the Boston Celtics in the second round and they couldn't get the job done. Obviously you look at how Doc Rivers has also blown one other 2-0 lead. That was when his Clippers in 2016 were up against the Trailblazers. They were favored to win that series, but they ended up losing that series in 6 games as the Trailblazers ended up winning the series 4-2. In other words, what I'm saying is that Doc Rivers has a bad habit of blowing leads time and time again, and he is the common denominator. It's not even like Doc Rivers has bad teams most of the time. Most of the time, he's actually on pretty loaded teams. I mean, he's got to work with a lot of star players. Holy cow, you look at the list of players he's got to work for. He got to work for Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, that was on the Boston Celtics, and then he gets traded to the Los Angeles Clippers, and guess what? He gets to work with Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, JJ Redick, and DeAndre Jordan. So that's a pretty good roster all around. Of course, they also had Jamal Crawford. That Clippers team was really loaded. The fact they couldn't even get to one conference finals with that stacked roster, I don't know what to tell you about that. Obviously, you look at how he also got to work with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George for a year as well. So that's a pretty talented duo to have in the National Basketball Association. And then on the Philadelphia 76ers, he had Joel Embiid and James Harden to work with. He also had Ben Simmons the first year in Philadelphia. Remember, this was back when Ben Simmons actually cared about playing basketball, and now he gets to work with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Damian Lillard. And now Doc Rivers wants to sit up here and tell everybody that he didn't have good enough rosters to win. Are you kidding me, Doc Rivers? Come on, man. You got to stop making excuses because at some point, the problem is you. I'm not saying that you aren't a great coach. I think you can overachieve with bad rosters, but it's been pretty clear that when you've been handed great basketball players, you can't get the job done for the most part. There's a reason why you've you've only won one championship in your NBA career. And JJ Redick was absolutely right. I'm going to take JJ Redick's word pretty seriously. JJ Redick was actually a former player for Doc Rivers, so he got to see some things firsthand. And as for the people that are coming to his defense, I don't find those guys credible. I'm hearing Austin Rivers speaking up and defending his dad, and I'm like, bro, your dad was the only reason why you lasted as long as you did in the NBA. You were a scrub, and your dad was nice enough to take you in for a decade in the NBA, and he basically had a lot of connections, because when you played basketball, you were absolutely horrible. And then, of course, you look at Pat Beverly defending Doc Rivers. That one I do respect a little bit more, but Patrick Beverly does play for the Milwaukee Bucks, so I do expect him to defend his current coach. But I thought JJ Redick hit it on the head. There's a reason why I've always considered JJ Redick to be one of the smartest analysts in the game of basketball. It's because he actually doesn't follow narratives, and that he actually tries to look for facts. And the facts are that Doc Rivers isn't good enough come playoff time, and Doc Rivers, he has a bad habit of blowing leads in playoff series, and obviously he's lost Game 7 at home on 5 different occasions. Actually, one of those was in the bubble, so really it was 4, but you get the idea. The point is Doc Rivers has lost way too many Game 7s at home, and whenever he has a lead in the series, you can always count on Doc Rivers to blow that lead in the series. You also look at how Doc Rivers has a 6-10 record in Game 7s, so anytime Doc Rivers has a chance to win an elimination game, he usually loses more often than not. The thing with Doc Rivers is that he can get up on you in the series, but can he hold on to that lead? He usually can't do that, and that's the problem that Doc Rivers has had throughout his coaching career. He can only win if you give him an absolutely stacked roster. You look at that one title where he won with the Boston Celtics. I think I could have won that title if I was their head coach. I mean, that was the first super team formed in the NBA at that time. You had Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, Rajon Rondo, and you had a bunch of weapons on that Boston Celtics team. I'm sure an average head coach could have won a title with that roster, because that roster was way too loaded for the NBA during that time period. And the fact that Doc Rivers only has one title to show for it, that just really tells you how overrated Doc Rivers is as a head coach. I know that a lot of people like to say Doc Rivers is an all-time great coach, but he really is anything but that. I think he's a solid coach, but I think that when it comes to playoff time, I think he gets outcoached badly in a lot of these matchups. That's one of the main reasons why he continues to blow leads year after year. It's because he's a poor in-game adjustment of a head coach. Obviously, he gets outclassed on multiple occasions on multiple franchises. I think the common denominator is pretty clear, and for the Milwaukee Bucks to hire Doc Rivers, that was a massive mistake by the organization. I would not be surprised if the Milwaukee Bucks get eliminated in the NBA playoffs sooner rather than later. They might even get eliminated in the first round depending on who they play. If they don't get eliminated in the first round, I can guarantee you they're not going to get to the conference finals this year. They're going to get eliminated in the second round at the latest. The point is, the Milwaukee Bucks are not title contenders with Doc Rivers as their head coach, and I thought JJ Redick was absolutely right for blasting Doc Rivers. I'm getting sick of the mainstream media defending this guy all the time like he's the greatest coach on earth, because quite frankly he isn't. And for JJ Redick to call out Doc Rivers, credit to JJ Redick where credit is due, because a lot of analysts are afraid to call out guys like Doc Rivers. So that's why JJ Redick was absolutely right for his comments on Doc Rivers, as I believe the Bucks will underachieve in the NBA playoffs with Doc Rivers as their head coach. Remember, go ahead and subscribe to Sports Guy Talking, like the video, and please comment down below. If you guys do that, I may shout you guys out in my Instagram story every Monday. That'll be for the @Dustin Tran Instagram account. Make sure to follow me on Instagram @Dustin Tran and @Sports Guy Talking. Also, go follow me on Twitter @Dustin Tran. Again, go ahead and do those things that I just told you guys to go do. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the content that was just produced. Peace out. I hope you enjoyed that video. Want more Sports Guy Talking, the home of great sports content? Make sure you click that subscribe button to get the latest from Sports Guy Talking. Go ahead and like the video, comment down below, check the description box on the video in order to follow my Instagram and Twitter. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from the YouTube channel Sports Guy Talking.